I'm Jono Buchanan, and in this video we're going to explore the concept of detune, and in fact pitch a bit more broadly. So what I've got here is a backing track, and what I want to do is to add a kind of synth lead sound to it. It's just that my synth lead sound at the moment sounds a bit thin and like it's not really going to cut through within the context of the mix. Let's just hear the backing track and I'm going to play some notes over the top, and I think you'll hear what I mean. Okay, thin, horrible, not really doing anything at all worthwhile from the mix perspective. So what I've got is this sound within RetroSynth, and I can see that it's made from two oscillators, shape 1 and shape 2, and I can see that both of these are using the same waveform at the moment. The mix dial over here on the right hand side allows me to set the balance between those two, but broadly this isn't really going to be doing anything at the moment because we're using exactly the same shape for both of these oscillators. So if I play a note and I move the balance dial, actually not much is going to change. Okay, so what I want to do is to start thickening this sound out, making it feel like it's got some power and some punch, but also some real weight and thickness. So the first thing I'm going to do is to take the second oscillator and I'm going to tune it down an octave. Now the way to do that is literally here to grab the semitones dial, and that's taking this second shape and it's detuning it an octave, and straight away that should give us a bit more strength. Okay, sure enough, but what I also want to do, effectively, a semitone offset doesn't produce what we call detune. Yes, it is detuning the second oscillator, but it's done so in a way that by overlaying this octave, it almost sounds like I'm just adding harmonics of a sound that exists already. Real detune is about effectively offsetting in smaller fragments than an entire semitone. In other words, what I want to do is to start detuning in cents. Now, a bit like dollars and cents, cents in a musical context literally are 1% or individual degrees, if you like, of a semitone. There are 100 cents in a semitone, in other words. So when I start detuning in cents, what we're going to find is the sound's going to start getting thicker because effectively the pitch base of the sound that I'm playing is wider. Let's compare that to 0 detune. And if I take it back to 15 again, and suddenly everything sounds a bit more analog because we've got this kind of slightly wonky tuning, and as a result the pitch base is wider and the whole thing feels a little bit fatter. Okay, so that's one thing I can do. The next thing I also want to do is to start to introduce modulation of pitch so that effectively the pitch isn't just a static bass. What it's starting to do instead is to move, again widening its pitch base a bit further. Now the easiest way to do this is to introduce vibrato. Now vibrato, as its name suggests, literally bends or moves pitch. You may have seen violinists holding down notes on strings and literally moving their finger backwards and forwards. So effectively what happens is that note is being bent sharp and then flat and then sharp and then flat, and that's what vibrato is. And we can do that in synthesizers as well, simply by introducing a vibrato amount. And you can see that as I do that, I'm controlling the amount of movement I'm going to create. Well, 0.37 is 37 cents. So in other words, that's going to be quite a lot of movement unless I want to create something really wild. Okay, so that's controlling the amount of vibrato. How do I control the speed of it? Well, that's done down here. There's a vibrato module here within RetroSynth, which allows me to choose a shape and a rate. Now, I can either clock this to tempo, in other words, I can make the speed in tune with my track, or I can turn it off. And actually, for the sort of speed of vibrato I want, which is fast, I don't really mind whether or not it's synchronized to tempo or not. It's going to be so quick, we're not going to really hear whether or not it's in time or not. So I've got the speed at the moment, which is set to 11 Hertz, and here I can control the vibrato amount. Let's speed it up. Okay, that's quite interesting. What happens when I introduce more amount? If you didn't enjoy that, you're watching the wrong channel. Okay, so what we've got now is a semitone offset. Well, in fact, we haven't even got a whole semitone. This is now 69 cents. I'm even going to rein that in a little bit more. And then what I'm going to do is just slightly bring the speed back down as well. So we've still got a really fast vibrato, but one that still allows this note to feel like, well, a G if I play a G. Okay, and there's one more thing I want to do as well, which is I'm going to introduce glide. Now what glide allows me to do is to set a time that it takes for one note to bend to another. So in other words, as I play one note and it gives away to another, it's going to just bend rather than just simply jumping. We're going to get a slide. And I can control the amount of time here that it takes to get from one note to another. I can even go up to something absolutely crazy like 5 seconds if I want to. But to demonstrate this, let's take it down to, I don't know, a second or so. But again, that's going to be too long for me to play anything sort of musically that is coherent, I suppose. So what I'm going to do is to bring that time back down again. Even that's a little bit long, so I'm going to just pull it down a little bit more. And then what we'll do is we'll start adding a sort of synth part here, which hopefully is going to have a lot more impression to it, a lot more strength to it than the part that I was experimenting with at the beginning of the video. Okay, so here's my new melody, which definitely feels like it's got a bit more about it. I'm going to quantize that so it's absolutely in time. And there's one more thing I want to do. Now, there's another obvious controller for pitch, and that is pitch bend. And if you're working with a controller keyboard, you may well find that it has a pitch bend wheel, which allows you to record in real time. I have got one on this controller keyboard. But what I'm actually going to do is to create a pitch bend ramp sort of as a post-production process, so we can see that it's possible to add pitch bend after the fact rather than at the same time as recording notes. I'm going to open this region up by double-clicking it, and I can see it down here in the piano roll display. And what this is going to allow me to do, let's just scroll down so we can see our synth line. What this is going to allow me to do is to open up the sort of automation for this MIDI region. And when I press this button, what I can then do is to come and find the parameter that I either want to adjust or add. Now at the moment I can see the note velocities for the phrase that I've played, but what I want to do is to click here on the available parameters and come and find pitch bend, which is here. So here's pitch bend, but of course at the moment I don't have any data because I didn't record any at the time of putting my line in. So what I'm going to do is to double click to create a point. Now pitch bend, of course, its static position is going to be 0. Unlike some controllers which start at 0 and go up to 127, remember pitch bend can go in either direction, sharp or flat. So 0 is its kind of default position. That means there's no pitch bend applied. And what I want to do is to create another point here, just on this last note that I want to have bend. And then what I'm going to do is to create a point right at the end of that note, so that effectively I'm in a position to just control how far that note bends at the end. And if I want that bend to happen later, maybe just in this last bar, I can move this part across and then I'll hear it there instead. Now, there's no doubt what the synth needs now is some reverb and some delay, but as a sound in itself, suddenly it feels like it belongs to this track because of Detune and because of this pitch bend. So what we've done within this video is to look at various ways in which we can thicken the pitch of a synth sound. We've discovered that we can just detune an oscillator. Firstly, by an octave and then by some cents to basically effectively thicken its pitch bass. Then we can interrupt its signal using vibrato, effectively taking that pitch bass and making it move backwards and forwards very quickly to effectively widen that pitch footprint even more. And then what we've seen is that we can add pitch bend. And if we don't do that as we're recording our notes, it doesn't matter because we can draw in any changes we want to pitch bend after we've actually recorded the notes themselves. And actually we introduce glide as well, this idea that we can bend from one note to another, asking the synth to effectively create this slightly smoother transition between notes.